Well, to discuss the DRC's election further, I'm joined now from Leicester, England, by Michael Tshibangu. He is a political advisor for the opposition leader Moise Katumbi. In London, we have Vava Tampa. He is the founder of Save the Congo. And in Ghana's capital, Accra, we have Kambale Musavuli. He is the spokesman of the group Friends of the Congo. Thanks, all three of you, so much for joining us. Let me begin with Michael Tshibangu. First of all, do you think this further delay in the general election is a travesty for democracy, or is it necessary to at least try to ensure a freer and fairer election?
It is a travesty for democracy when you consider that the election in DRC was supposed to be held in 2016. We are 2 years late, and this is inexcusable. It cannot be justified. They had 5 years, they didn't do it. They were given 2 more years to make sure that the election held on time, but still, they still didn't do it. This is a sign of gross incompetence, totally inexcusable and totally unjustifiable.
Okay, Vava Tampa, are you on the same page?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go even further. Look, this was expected. Everyone knew that Kabila does not and did not want to organize election. Kabila doesn't want to organize election because he is frightened of giving up power. He doesn't trust anyone around him, including his own cousin, Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari. That's the reason he doesn't want to organize elections. And this is why from the onset, as a solution, some of us in the civil society organizations or groups in Congo as well as outside Congo, we have been pushing from the onset for a civilian transition without Kabila, without his camp, without the opposition, without any politician whatsoever. A transition of technocrat to be led by a neutral figure, and the figure that everyone agrees on is Denis Mukwege, who, by the way, received the Nobel Peace Prize just a couple of days ago. And that transition to go on to organize election that would be free, fair, transparent, inclusive, and non-violent. Without that transition, we cannot trust Kabila. He has had 5 years, an extra year, another extra year, and the reason he hasn't organized it because he doesn't want to give up power.
Okay.
It's time for SADC to come in and essentially impose that civilian transition on Kabila by force using political will.
Okay, I want to move on to that SADC issue you just spoke of and having them intervene if it's a possibility. But Kambale, let me ask you, at this point, we know there were very questionable issues with the delays prior in the last 2 years. But in all honesty, right now, the Electoral Commission says we are not logistically prepared to carry out this election. Is that fair? And do you expect the Electoral Commission to get their act together enough to ensure that voting can take place relatively soon?
I wouldn't want to repeat what my two colleagues have said. Logistically, of course, it's unreasonable to have the election take place this Sunday. That's clear to everyone. But my colleagues have mentioned already earlier that the fact that for 7 years they have been unwilling to organize elections, 5 years of Kabila's last term and the past 2 years, is clearly showing that they have no intent of organizing free and fair election. But the reason even why the elections are being discussed, are being organized, is really because there is a pursuit from the Kabila regime to seek legitimacy, not from the Congolese people, but from the international community. They do know that those are measures or levers that the international community will look at. Is there democracy? Are there elections taking place? Without looking at the issues that may occur. This happened in 2011. There was a rigged election in 2011, and Western nations legitimized the results of the 2011. And we can also argue for 2006. So now the challenge that we'll face this December 23rd, when it's going to be clear to the population and the international community that election will not take place, will be to make sure that we continue to shine light on the issues, because we know as we speak that security forces are going to harm the population, as obviously they will hit the street. They'll demand the elections take place, and they'll demand that the aspirations is reflected. So that's why it's critical for everyone in the international community to watch what's happening in
It's
DRC.
interesting, Kambale, just quickly comment on this, because as you say that, the ICC chief prosecutor said today that there is now a risk of grave crimes being committed in Congo ahead of the next vote. Why do you think she made a point of saying that? It sounds a bit vague, but why would she have said it?
If you look at the historical line for the past 2 years, we've had many Congolese die. Tereska Pangala, a young Congolese woman who was killed within a church, coming out for a rally. We have Rossi Mukendi. Just not long ago, we had university students. That was Rodrigue Liwo and Yassine Kimbafu, university student shot and killed at the university campuses. So we know that the security forces are willing to kill their own citizens, of course, using the orders of the commander-in-chief, I would say. I could argue Kabila or even any government official. So we know that this will happen, and this is why the ICC is warning the situation.
Yeah, Vava, quickly, go ahead.
I'm really angry at the international community. I'm incredibly angry at the UK, at the French, at the Americans, the Canadian, the South African, the Swedish, the Norwegian. I'm even more angrier at SADC leaders because we have known this. And even more, I mean, when the chief prosecutor of the ICC says more crimes could be committed, I wonder whether or not she knows that crimes were committed in Kasai. We have an entire province right in the heart of Congo in Kasai, which has been ransacked by Kabila's people. And we are talking about 1.5 million people being displaced. We're talking about over 4,000 people killed, including 2 UN experts. We are talking about 90 mass graves found in one province in a space of 1 year. And that province was ransacked simply because they took a stand against Kabila. We are seeing the same situation in Beni. So now when the ICC prosecutor says that, I wonder why is she alluding? Are those not crimes enough? Those were not enough to alert her and other people that the Congolese people are being massacred by their government. How many more people they want to be killed? It's not as if there isn't a solution. That we know what needs to be done. And that is a civilian transition without Kabila, led by someone like Denis Mukwege. The question is why that option hasn't been put into place, why that option hasn't been implemented. That's the question I want to be. I want the international community to answer
Baba,
to. Because keep our lives
raising Denis Mukwege. What do you really believe he can do? What position should he take? How should he rally the Congolese right now and the international community?
Look, what we found ourselves, we have on one side, you had Kabila and his camp, essentially refusing to give up power. And you have on the other side, you have politician opposition figures, some of them in exile, like Moise Katumbi and so on and so forth, some of them on the ground in prisons. So clearly, no politician can unify the entire country to go forward in an election. Because of that, we need someone who is neutral, an independent figure, a moral authority, if you like. And there are two names that had been put forward by the Congolese people. One is Monseigneur Mosengo, and Mosengo has clearly said that he's not going to do it, partially because he's elderly. The only other figure we have who can easily unify both the opposition and the civil society and everyone else, as well as SADC and the international community, is potentially Denis Mukwege. And that's the reason why people like me in civil society and other people have been pushing this idea for nearly a year now to save lives. It's the only way that we can save Congolese lives.
Why aren't we hearing the same
lead us
from
into
him?
A democratic way.
Why aren't we hearing a push from him? Where is his campaign?
Well, for a start, that because Denis Mukwege doesn't want to be president. He's not a politician.
So
he's a civil
you
society
can't say he's
figure.
The figure that
He's
we
a
should
moral
be looking
authority.
at if he's personally not interested.
Well, to say he's not interested is to say sort of we asked him and he said no. I have spoken to him on this. I have been following this guy for nearly 2 years now, essentially to sway him, to convince him that he needs to do this task. And I have reasons to believe that push come to shove, he will do it. He will lead this country forward into a democratic way forward.
I'm wondering if we should host a separate segment on that issue alone. But let me go back to Michael Tshibangu.
Certainly.
I mean, I'd like to ask you, Michael, then where you think a real solution actually lies. I mean, Vava's talking about international intervention, particularly SADC should take the initiative to step in and actually get on the ground and do something. to ensure a peaceful transition of power somehow, but you're going to hear a number of international players complain that, just as Vava said, there is no real unifying candidate to rally behind. Many of these candidates are divisive in their own way. So what do you think the international community could do? If not the international community, where is a solution?
Well, as it has been mentioned, it is clear that the problem right here is the government of DRC. Even during the electoral campaign, we've seen the government still using violence. We had Martin Fayulu, the candidate of whom we support, a campaign being disturbed by police officers using tear gas, water cannon, and shooting at people who are simply attending the campaign of an opposition figure. What we've also seen the government, the governor of the city of Kinshasa yesterday suspending the electoral campaign in the city of Kinshasa at a time where the opposition figure, Martin Fayulu, was supposed to hold his meeting. So even if the campaign is not free, the government is doing everything to control this process and limit people's ability to express themselves freely. And the signs are not good. And we've given them 5 years, they've not done anything.
Right.
We've given them 2 years, it's still not enough.
That we understand.
are continuing to see violence on the ground. We are continuing to see oppression on the ground.
We know your position on that.
At some point, the international community will...
At some point,
the international community will have to intervene, and if they don't intervene, there's some point being now, because we can't really waste any more time. This violence, the risk of violence, as it has been pointed out, of greater violence, because there's already violence on the ground, is real. If we don't do anything now, the situation is going to get worse, because what we're seeing is Kabila is determined to stay in power and is using every means necessary to stay in power, including killing innocent civilians who simply want change in DRC.
Okay, so Vava, let me ask you then, I mean, in the shorter term here, if this election doesn't happen, or even if it does happen and it is deemed to be non-transparent or rigged or anything else, there are grave fears over the regional implications of any kind of violence or more instability breaking out in the DRC. What is your greatest fear in that respect?
My greatest fear is what's going to happen to nearly 80 million people. That's an entire country we are talking about. Look, I mentioned Kasai before. Kasai has been ransacked by this government, and the man who was responsible of the police and the army when Kasai was being ransacked is actually Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari, who, Kabila's cousin, who's being pushed forward to be his replacement. And that gives you an idea what's going to happen to our people. So Kasai is one of those places. We need to ask ourselves what's going to happen to that people, because they have already expressed that they are against this regime. What's going to happen in Beni? What's going to happen to pro-democracy movement in that country, in Congo? I mean, the reason Congo has been in such a crisis is partially because of democratic or legitimacy issues. And this is a people who are pushing and standing and calling on the world, look, we want to become a democracy. We want to move forward. Give us a push. And the world continue to fail the Congolese people. And the only way forward now, there is no other excuse. If we do not support a civilian transition without any politicians, led by a neutral figure, Denis Mukwege or even Mosengo, then we have no other excuse. That is essentially us saying, Kabila, stay in power and kill as many people as you want. It's as simple as that.
And Kambale Musavuli, I imagine you're somewhat on the same page as Vava there, but tell me, if you can, what the fears are of the potentially impending instability, again, spilling over regional borders.
Well, I'll differ a bit. The reason why I'll differ, I think that we're forgetting the agency of the Congolese people. The reason why we're even discussing the election, if it wasn't for the Congolese people themselves putting pressure on the Kabila regime, we wouldn't even be having a discussion around that. And they have showed tremendous courage by hitting the streets. When you're looking at the campaign rallies of the opposition leaders, thousands of Congolese are coming in support of the opposition candidates who are campaigning for president. It's clearly a statement to me that the Congolese people as a whole want a new beginning, regardless of who's going to lead them, that they're just clear that they will not want the current regime. But on the way forward, I think that's what's very important, because we were discussing, so what's the way forward? Is it SADC? Is it the international community? I will continue to insist that the Congolese people have actually latched onto this opportunity. They know that we may not have elections this Sunday, December 23rd, but they are mobilizing for it. At the same time as I'm making this statement, reports that military deployment is happening in Kinshasa, in Goma. So the people are seeing that. The international community is bearing witness to that as well. So while the Congolese are going to mobilize and organize to have a new leadership in the country, they depend on those who are outside of the Congo to shine light on the issue, so that whenever the people are being shot on Sunday, the media can cover it, pressure can be put on Kabila, and of course, Kabila has to step away, and the election has to be organized way differently with a transition.
Okay.
That I am in agreement with, but for the leader, it's up to the Congolese people to choose who's going to lead them for the years to come.
Kambale Musavuli, I will have to give you the last word because unfortunately we are completely out of time for this segment of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of our panelists so much for joining us.